Hi everyone, welcome to one of our workshop Wednesdays, creating a lab group handbook with Quarto. My name is Eric. I'm a scientific programmer and educator with the Communications and Cyber Technologies Data Science Group at University of Arizona. Excuse me. So today we're going to start by looking at what the purpose of a lab group handbook is, what the benefits of it are. We're going to gain a basic understanding of what Quarto is and what it can do. We're going to get everybody set up using GitHub, if you aren't already. And we're going to start with a template group handbook. And that is, by the end of this, going to become a published product that you'll have ready to go to share with your lab group and edit. And so the prerequisites of this basically are have a recent-ish version of RStudio installed, which comes with Quarto. That'll install it for you. And to have Git installed on your computer. And if you don't have it already or you're not sure, we're going to go through a way to check. And I'll give you some links in the description and in these slides for how to install Git if you don't have it already. So it's a lot of stuff, but at the end, like I said, again, you're going to have something usable, ideally. So what is a lab handbook? So this presentation or this tutorial is largely inspired by this Tendler et al. Paper titled Why Every Lab Needs a Handbook in eLife. So I do recommend reading this, but in the paper they describe that a lab handbook is a living document that communicates the lab ethos. It normalizes and communicates lab expectations, improves equity among lab members, and it streamlines and standardizes the onboarding and offboarding processes in a lab. And in the paper, they describe some scenarios that could be avoided if a lab just had a lab handbook with some of these things in it. So I won't mention all of them, but for example, a lab member joins a lab, sees all the already established lab members being really highly productive, and puts really high expectations on themselves, ends up working long hours and weekends, even though the PI doesn't expect this or want this. So that could be avoided if there was some kind of document explaining what the expectations are. Another example, a trainee feels uncomfortable about traveling to a particular country for a conference, but they don't know where or how to raise those concerns. And I'll add another example that wasn't in the Tendler et al. Paper. A lab member is leaving because they're graduating or they got a job or whatever, and they don't know what to do with the data that they're working on and analyzing. And so it's just on their laptop. And then it's up to some postdoc or another student or maybe the PI of the lab group to like figure out where that data is, realize they don't have access to it, contact the person, maybe their institutional email address doesn't work anymore, and then figure out once they get the data like how to interpret it, is there code already, right, all that stuff, because there's no offboarding process that's documented. So yeah. There are many different ways to organize this information. And so, there's a couple examples here, and I'll post a link with more examples in the description of this video. But these are great in terms of their content, and these are just relatively simple. So the Zipkin Lab and the Belai Lab are both just Markdown documents hosted on a GitHub repository. The Wind Physics group is a PDF. Today, we're going to make something super cool. Not that these aren't cool, but we're going to make something very cool and slick using Quarto as our medium. So what is Quarto? Quarto is an open source scientific and technical publishing system. So right there from that description, you'll realize that it is for more than just making a lab handbook website. It is actually really generally very useful and a good thing to learn. It's in many ways the successor to R Markdown. So if you've used R Markdown before, it'll look familiar, but if you haven't, don't worry about it. It is pretty easy to learn. And it is a way of combining prose, potentially code and the output from that code into a variety of different output formats, including like HTML, PDF, Word documents, presentations, like this presentation you're watching right now was made with Quarto. And this is kind of how it works under the hood. You are editing these .qmd source files that are basically plain text. And they can have some code chunks in them. It doesn't have to be R, it can be Python or Julia. That's one of the things that's different about Quarto from R Markdown. But there's some engine. If you're using R, it's the knitr engine that runs that code and gets the output, combines it all into a Markdown document, and then passes that to Pandoc and some filters and things, and that gets converted into an output of some kind. And so you don't have to worry about all this stuff. This is just how it's doing it under the hood. So the next technology I mentioned is GitHub. What is that? So GitHub is a website, github.com. It's a platform for sharing files. These files are often code. It's sort of designed with code in mind, but they don't have to be code. They can be like Quarto documents, for example. And it enables collaboration via Git. And what is Git? Git is a version control tool. So you can think of it as basically like a fancy, more sane in some ways, less sane in others, a version of like, track changes and like saved version history, right? We're not going to get into the depths of a lot of the stuff I'm going to mention in this. So what we're going to do in this is get you the bare minimum of using Git in RStudio. And I'm not really going to go into depth explaining like what it is, what it does, all the power of it. So just trust me that it is a useful thing to learn beyond just this workshop. And if you don't want to learn more, that's okay. We're just going to get you the bare minimum to get your code from your computer to GitHub. So that's how Git is going to help with that, basically. And GitHub is going to offer us also this automated deployment of our book. So what's going to happen by the end of this workshop is you'll be able to just edit those Quarto documents on your computer, do some stuff to get that code synced up to GitHub, and then GitHub is going to take care of the rest. It's going to take care of rendering that into a website and serving that up as a public website you'll be able to share with your lab group members or potential lab group members. GitHub also offers us a controlled way of managing edits and suggestions to the book. So if you think of a spectrum where on one end you have just like a shared Google Doc that anybody that has access can make suggestions to, which is great. You don't have to think about it a lot, but also like you're not really, it's kind of hard to keep track of who made which edits when and why. And then on the other end of that spectrum, you have like a PDF file that is generated from a Word doc that lives on your laptop. And so that way, if anybody wants to make changes, they have to email you, you have to make the changes yourself, and then you have to, print the new PDF and then send that to everybody in the lab or put it on the shared network drive or whatever, right? So it's a lot of work on your part. So GitHub is going to offer us something in between where you can manage who has access to make changes and who doesn't, and you can have an opportunity to give feedback on those changes before they become permanent. So at this point, you might be asking yourself as a busy PI or prospective PI, do I really have time for this? And that is a valid question. It is a time investment to learn these tools, but I promise you that they are really useful. So, not only useful tools in academia, but they're also both highly transferable skills. Git and GitHub is something that any job that's doing any kind of coding or anything like that is going to be really, really useful for that. Is going to be, basically required for any job that involves code. So it's a great thing for your trainees to learn. Quarto has a bunch of uses in academia. This is a link to a great talk about how Quarto can be used for academics. And this is a paper about GitHub and how it's useful in ecology and evolution, but also sort of beyond that. So for example, you can use this combination of tools to create reproducible manuscripts. You can use it for collaborating on those reproducible manuscripts, or just on analysis code or data. You can use it to set up a course website. You can use it to set up a personal research website, et cetera, et cetera. So the first step here is to get set up with Git and GitHub and in RStudio. So what we're going to do here is get RStudio to find Git, and if it doesn't already, and work with GitHub. So the first thing we're going to do is check, do we have Git installed, and does RStudio know where it is? So in RStudio, we're going to go to the Tools menu, Global Options, choose the Git/svn option, and check that it knows where the Git executable is. And if that is blank, if it doesn't know where it is, you might need to install Git, or if you know you installed it, you might need to find it on your computer if you installed it in like not a default location. So in the slides here, these are links to instructions for installing Git for Windows and on Mac on the happygitwithr.com website. So those are great instructions. And then we're gonna, we'll come back to this. Let's go back here. So let me switch over to RStudio, and I've done my best to try to like mimic a brand new RStudio, like somebody that's never set Git up before. So let's see how that goes. So I have it installed, and if I go to the Tools menu and choose Global Options and go to this Git SVN section here, we should have this box checked, Enable Version Control Interface for RStudio projects, and we should have something in this Git executable. It shouldn't say not found. This is where if you know that you installed Git on Windows, for example, and it's not in the usual place, you might need to just click this Browse button and find git.exe. On a Mac, it's almost always going to be in some standard location that RStudio can find it, I think. So it probably means that you don't have it installed. Unfortunately, it's very easy to install on a Mac. Okay. So that's all we needed to check there. And now we're going to use this package to set up our kind of connection to GitHub and set up our Git configuration. So we can install that with install.packages, parentheses, quotation marks, use this. And let me just, while that's happening, I'm going to open up my little keyboard shortcut tracking thing so you can see that on the screen when I use keyboard shortcuts. Okay, in case I forget to mention them. So we've installed use this. I'm going to load it with library use this. And we're going to run git_sitrep. This stands for situation report. So it's going to give us a situation report on our Git and GitHub setup. All right, so this is, again, assuming somebody who's never set Git or GitHub up on their computer. If you have set it up before, you'll likely see something pretty different than what I have here. But essentially, it's giving us a checklist of things along with like tasks to do. So there's some red X's here, some red boxes that tell us, we need to do stuff. So the first thing I notice is my name and email are not set, and it says I need to configure it using this code. So I'm going to copy this code, actually. So inside of those backticks there. And I'm going to fill in my name. And this is just your name. It's not a username. It's just your first name, last name, whatever. And then for user email, this does need to be the same email address that you use to sign up for github.com. So if you haven't made it a free account on github.com yet, pause the video here and do that, and then use the same email address here. So I'll put those in, and so I've got user.name equals my name, user.email equals my email, and I'm going to go ahead and run that. And then if I want to, I can run git_sitrep again just to check that that worked. And yep, there we go. It indeed did work. The next thing we see is this vaccinated equal or vaccinated is false. I'm going to go ahead and use the suggestion here and run git underscore vaccinate. You don't have to do this. You can read more about what it does in the help file for this function. But I'm going to go ahead and run that. The other thing we have here, it says default initial branch name is unset. I'm going to go ahead and set that. This is another one where I'm not sure how necessary it really is, but I'm going to go ahead and set it, which is, I think you do with git default branch configure. Yes. Git underscore default branch configure. And the default there is main. And I'm going to go ahead and just use that. So I don't need to enter any arguments in there. Just hit enter. You may have this, if you have this already configured, it may be master. It's an older term for the default initial branch. And main is the newer default. So yeah, feel free to set that or not. So that is it for the Git stuff up here. And then the next bit is the GitHub stuff. So here is like Git is running on your computer, right? And it knows who you are now. And the next part is GitHub, the website, right? We need to authenticate to that in some way. So in order to get our code up onto GitHub, GitHub needs to know that we are who we say we are. And there are a couple ways to do this. The way we're going to do it today is by creating what's called a personal access token. So again, if you've already set this up and you already have a way of authenticating to GitHub with, SSH, for example, you don't need to worry about this. We're not going to be using anything that only works with a personal access token today. There are some things that only work with that, but yeah. So we're going to just follow the instructions here. So to create a personal access token use this create GitHub token. So create underscore GitHub token. I'm going to hit enter, and that will open up a browser window here. And it'll ask me to log in to GitHub. So I will do that. And it's going to ask me here to describe the token's use case. So this usually is going to be like work laptop or something like that. You're going to describe the use on your computer. For me personally, I'm just going to call this demo token so that I remember to delete it later on, because I'm going to show you on screen here. Expiration. So a personal access token is like a password, but it can be temporary, and you can create more than one, or you can delete them at any time. So, you can pick the default. I usually go with like 60 days because it's annoying to reset it every month, but I don't want it to be longer than that, just for security reasons. And also because if I do it way longer than that, I forget how to do it. So you can change that to whatever you want. Don't need to change any of these checkboxes. They're all checked for you by the use this package. And then we're going to click the green generate token button. And that will bring you to a page that looks kind of like this. Yours will look different, obviously. And this here is the token, and this is your only chance to see it. So copy that, maybe paste it in like a password manager if you have one. But we're gonna store that using in RStudio in a second here. So just copy that, and then we're gonna go back over to RStudio. And we're going to follow the instructions. It says here, call git creds : git creds underscore set. And a common mistake here is to paste the token in. We're not going to do that. We're just going to hit enter, and it will prompt us for the token. And then we can Command V, paste that in, hit enter, and it will have added it. So we can now run git underscore sitrep one more time, and should give us some green checks, or at least no red X's. Yeah, great. So we've now set things up. One quick note, for those of you that don't know, so here I typed git creds : git creds set, and for these use this ones, I haven't been typing this. If you have the package loaded, you don't have to type the name of the package : but if you want to use a function from a package without loading the whole package, that's what this is. So I didn't run library git creds at any point, but I can still use the git cred set function by using package name : function. Okay, so we're all set up. This is a good time, to pause and make sure your Git sitrep looks kind of like mine. Obviously, it'll be a different name, different email. If you have down here under GitHub user, if you have a different email address than you put for this top part, this is a good time to go and fix that. So you'll go back and use that use git config function. You'll say use git config user.email, and you'll set it to be the same email that you have used for GitHub. So that'll show up down here. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. I'm going to close this personal access token page now. I don't need it anymore. All right. So we went through git sitrep and did everything it told us to do. Okay. So next thing I'll mention here is GitHub organization. So you've all hopefully created a free personal account at github.com, but you can also create organizations. And this is a nice thing. So if you're a PI of a lab, you create a organization for your lab, and then rather than having your trainees or your students or collaborators upload their code to their personal space on github.com, they can upload it to this organization. And that way, when they leave, when they move on to another job or whatever, their code stays in the lab organization, and you can manage who has access to it, and you can change that kind of at any time. And you can change whether the code is public or private, right, and so on. So if you want to create an organization, you can do that right now. I'll show you on GitHub in a second, but there's a plus button that has a new organization thing under there, and you can just kind of follow the prompts to create that. So here I am on github.com. Let me make that a little bit bigger. And this plus button, oops, let me move my face. There's a plus button here that I can click on, and then I can choose a new organization. I would want to choose the free option in most cases. And I want to give it a name, and this would be something like, so your personal GitHub name is, your name or something, but this would be like, Scott Lab or something like that. And it needs to not have spaces. It needs to have, it doesn't have to be all lowercase, but I like all lowercase separated by hyphens. Scott Lab's already taken, so you might have to get creative here. I could call it like UA Scott Lab for University of Arizona or something. You'll put in your contact email here. This should be probably the same email address you use for GitHub personal account. And you're going to say this belongs to your personal account. It's tempting to think that it belongs to an institution, but you want control over this organization. So say it belongs to you. And then just accept the terms of service, hit next. And I'm not going to do that right now. I don't want to create an organization, but it should walk you through any further steps that are needed. So yeah, I will go back to where we were. Yes, need that in a second. So this is optional, but feel free to do that right now if you'd like. So now we're going to create our handbook from a template. So we've provided a template handbook that has a bunch of stuff already set up for you. And there's a link here, and I will also put the link in the description for the video to this template. And you're going to just click on that Use Template button, and you can optionally choose your newly created GitHub organization to create it in, and you're going to give it a name that is something like Scott Lab Handbook or whatever your name is, right? Or whatever your lab is called, -handbook, something like that. So here is that group handbook template. So this is in the CCT Data Science organization. We're going to click this green button up here, use this template. and sorry, let me move my face again, slightly blocking it. Use this template here. We'll do that. And underneath, we're going to choose create a new repository. When we do that, we have some options here. And one of the options here under owner, you can select, by default, it's you. But if you created a GitHub organization, you could choose that from this list. I belong to a bunch of GitHub organizations, so a bunch of things show up here. But you could select what organization you want it to show up in. I'm going to just do it for this demo in my personal account. And I'm going to call it Scott Lab Handbook. You can call yours whatever you want. You can optionally give it a description here. And we're going to need to leave it public. This cannot be private or the publishing step won't work. You can't have a GitHub Pages site from a private repository. So this has to be public. And we'll click Create Repository. And this will take a moment to create a new repository in wherever you put it. So the URL, mine says my GitHub username / Scott Lab Notebook. Yours will be either your username or your organization name up there. And yeah, you'll see all these files and a README and all this stuff is in your GitHub now. So excellent. The next thing we need to do is open it up in RStudio so that we can actually work on it on our computers locally. You can make edits on github.com, but it's going to be a lot easier to show you around and make those edits if we open it up in RStudio first. So to do that, we're going to click on this green code button here. And I think probably most people, it's going to default to this HTTPS tab. But if you've set things up differently, it might be on this SSH tab. Today, though, we're going to use this HTTPS one. And we're going to copy this URL. So it should start with HTTPS, and it should end with, if I kind of scroll over, a .git. We copy that, and then we go over to RStudio. Where to go? Here we are. And we're going to create a new project using that URL. So there's a couple ways to get there. One is up in the upper right here. There is a project menu. If you're in a project already, it might say something other than project to none here. And RStudio projects are great. We're not going to dive into what all they do, but basically they allow you to easily switch between different folders that you're working on your computer. So we're going to create a new project. You can also get to this from the File menu, File, New Project. But either way you do it, it opens up this dialog box that will pop up in a second here. Yeah, and we have some options. We're going to choose today version control. Check out a project from a version control repository. We're going to choose Git. And we're going to paste that URL in. So again, it'll be github.com / your username or organization name / whatever you called that repository.git. Then we need to choose where it's going to go on our computer. I'm just going to put it on the desktop because just for a demo. And we need to give it a name. I like to have that name be the same as what I called it on GitHub here. So, but you can name it something different if you want. And then we'll say create project. And if we've set Git and GitHub up correctly, this should download that and it'll open up a new project for you. Here we are. So you'll notice it says Scott Lab Handbook in the upper corner, so I can switch to that project anytime. And we have all those files that are on GitHub, right? We can look through the files here and see that I've got on the desktop, I've got a folder called Scott Lab Handbook, and I've got all these files in it. So we've now cloned that to our computer. We did that again by clicking on that code button, copying the URL, creating a new project from version control, and pasting that URL in. Now we're going to check that connection works. And we're going to just make a quick edit and go through the process of getting that edit up to GitHub so you can see how that works. We'll have a couple times to practice this in this workshop. So I'm going to open up this readme.md file, and I'm going to make a simple change. Instead of group-handbook-template, I'm going to give it a real title and call it like Scott Lab Group Handbook. You could call it a handbook or policies and procedures or whatever you want to call it. And I will save this. There's a little save icon, or you can go in the file menu to save it either way, or the Command S works too. And once we do that, over here under my face, we have this Git tab. And everybody should have that there, I think, by default. If you don't, you can click on this like pane button that looks like some squares and choose pane layout. And you can make sure that VCS, which stands for version control system, is checked somewhere in one of these panes. I think by default it is in this one in the upper right. And when you've made a change to a file and you save that change, you should see that file name appear in here. So the next thing we want to do is, once we've made some changes to a file or multiple files, is to commit those changes. Now, so I just clicked on that commit button, and a commit is Git terminology for basically a snapshot in time of the files in your project. And so again, this could be a bunch of related changes in multiple files, or it could be a single change in a single file, or whatever. We will need to check this checkbox next to any files we want to include in this commit or snapshot. And you'll see that the changes are shown down here. So red is things that were deleted. Green is things that were added. So this is kind of just how Git works. It works kind of line by line and shows you the changes. And we must include a description of these changes in this commit message box. You cannot leave this blank. So we have to say something like updated readme title. And then we'll click the commit button. And if it goes well, if it's successful, you should see something like one file changed, one insertion, one deletion. And we can close that once we see something that looks like success. And then you'll see this, let me make this a little bit bigger here. Your branch is ahead of origin/main by one commit. And what that means is that your local copy is ahead of the copy on GitHub by one commit. So if we want to sync this up and get those changes on GitHub, the next step is to use this push button. There's a push button here right in this box. There's also if we close this, there's also a push button right here, this green arrow. If we make this pane a little bit bigger, it'll actually say push. It doesn't matter which one you click, but click push. If this is successful, it'll say something like this. It'll say head, arrow, main, something like that. We can close that box, and then we can check on GitHub, and we can refresh this page, and you'll see that the title in the README has changed. Cool. Now the README is not part of the book. We'll get to that in a second. So this is something that has instructions from the template, and you'll probably want to edit it pretty heavily eventually. Yeah. Cool. So at this point, hopefully you've all gotten your own copy of the Lab Handbook on GitHub, and you've got it kind of connected up to RStudio. You're able to make changes on your RStudio and push those to GitHub and see them there. Next thing we're going to do is learn a little bit about Quarto. But first, let's take a look at your book. Let's get a preview of it. So if we go back to RStudio here, we're going to use the terminal. So not the console where you normally type R code, but the terminal tab. If you don't have a terminal tab for some reason, you can use the tools menu and say terminal, new terminal. Now your terminal may look different than mine. The prompt might be a $sign. It might not have any of this stuff in it. It might be different, but you should have some kind of prompt here. And all you're going to do is type Quarto space preview. This will render your book and launch it in like a local web browser server situation. So you'll be able to see a live preview that will change as you make changes to the source documents, these .qmd files that we'll get into in a second. While this is happening, you'll notice files appearing in the Git tab. These .html files are temporary. It's part of the process of Quarto doing its rendering thing. So don't worry about committing these. We don't want to commit these. If we just wait until it finishes, Quarto should clean all those up for us, and we won't see any changes in this Git tab. And it should open up your book for you. Ta-da! So this is your book. And let's just check again. Yep, nothing in the Git tab. So let me give you a quick tour of what's in your book. So we have a landing page that's got a title and authors, space for authors with icons for ORCID ID. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see on the video. ORCID ID badges there that can link to ORCID ID if you want. It has a publish date that is by default the last time that you rendered this. So that publish date will update every time you make changes to the book. We've got over on the left a table of contents for the whole book, as well as a search bar, which is one of my favorite pieces of it because I don't want to put a whole lot of time into figuring out how to organize all the information in this book. So I can just search for things, right? If I want to remember what a research compendium is, right, I can just start typing that, and I get links to the particular chapters in the book that have that information. It's also got a little light switch here so we can have dark mode, which is cool. On every page, there is also a table of contents, which is over on the right here. And so each of these sections actually has its own like URL. So if you want to send a link to a very particular part of your book, you can do that. We've also got on every page an edit this page and a report an issue link here, which are great ways for your lab members to make contributions to the book. These are not hooked up to the right spot yet, and we're going to change that so that they are. We've also got some pages here. So in the welcome page, the landing page here, you'll notice these boxes. These are called call-out boxes. All of these red ones that say edit this section are these are my thoughts. These are just my personal ideas about things you might want to put in your book in this section. Discussion topics, things to get you thinking or talking with your group members about kind of what should go in your lab handbook. Feel free to ignore these, delete them, do what you will with them. You don't have to use these sections, obviously. We're going to talk about how to edit all this stuff in a bit. You also get this nice editing this book page, which covers a lot of what's happening in this tutorial and talks about different ways that people can make contributions to the book, including like click on the edit this page link that I just talked about. And talking about, how to use the use this package to do pull requests and things like that, which again, we're not going to have time to get into today, but there's some information there. It also comes with a code of conduct that needs to be edited lightly probably, but it is made with University of Arizona in mind. So there's some links to University of Arizona policies and links to report misconduct at University of Arizona already included there for free. Largely inspired by the Balai Lab, but made kind of University of Arizona specific. So feel free to use this mostly as is if you'd like, or you can also change it. Most of these pages are pretty blank, except for my questions, discussion questions here. So it is kind of up to you to fill these out. These are just things that I kind of figure most lab handbooks are going to want to have some kind of group expectations page, some kind of onboarding and offboarding stuff. Yeah. The research best practices page is another kind of like value added thing here. So a lot of what we do in this group is teach people about research best practices, in particular how to organize their data and code. And so this is just our kind of opinion about one good way to do that. So feel free to use this, adopt these kinds of policies or suggestions in your lab, or feel free to edit it or scrap it completely if you don't like it. And then there's this references section that right now there's no citations in the book, but if I did make citations, all the references kind of show up in one place at the end here. And I'll show you how to add citations in a moment. So that's your book. Those are all the things it comes with. Let me pop this out so we can keep that separate from slides here. So you'll notice while you've done this Quarto preview, the terminal in your RStudio is like hung up, right? It's not, you can't type commands in here right now. And there's this little red stop button. And so that is kind of how it's able to watch what you're doing. So if we, yeah, these are the features I just talked about. This is a good time to take a break if we were doing this live. Or if you're watching the video, go ahead, take a break. Feel free, but I'm going to keep moving on. Yeah, let's make a small change before we talk about Quarto and what it all is. Let's make just a small change and see how this live preview works. So that landing page is index.qmd. The landing page has to be called that. This is just kind of a web thing. The landing page of any website is index.html. So we call this index.qmd. We're going to just edit something super simple. Here it says, welcome to the group name. We're going to change that to whatever your lab group is called. Save. I used Command S there. And we're going to go through those steps again to get it on GitHub. So I click the commit button. I check the checkbox next to the file. And it's taking a moment here, probably because I'm recording at the same time as doing this and running Quarto Preview. So it might take a moment. There we go. We see the changes. We have to give it a commit message. And we have to hit commit. And then we can click push. Actually, we didn't have to do that yet to see the change happen in the live preview, but it was a good way to practice. So I should have shown you separately that in the live preview, we'll do this again. So now it says, welcome to the Scott Lab. In this lab, we study. Let's try this again. I'll just show you what the live preview does. I was conflating two things there. So the live preview, ecology, just keep that nice and simple. We'll see this render box pop up in our preview here that's like localhost : some numbers. And when it finishes rendering, which takes a moment, we'll see, there it goes. We study ecology. So this is a live preview. This is only on your computer. This is not a website yet on the web. But this is great. So if you have this open on one window and you're editing on another window, that's a great way to do it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this Quarto file and what all this stuff is in it back here. So this is the anatomy of a sort of typical Quarto file with more stuff in it than the Quarto files we're have in them. But I'll still go through them. At the top, you'll see in these three dashes here bounding it. This is a header that is written using something called YAML, Y-A-M-L, which stands for yet another markup language. Big eye roll there. This is basically a way of doing like configuration files and things like that, but we'll see it a lot. So we have these key value pairs. So there's title and then colon and then a value for that. Author, colon, a value for that. Format, colon, And then here's where it gets a little tricky. Nestedness is indicated by indentation. So we have two spaces here indenting it. So the format is HTML, and then underneath HTML, we've got some more options, TOC, and then we've got the value for that, true. So that's the YAML header. You'll also often see in Quarto documents code. So this is a code block with R code in it. If we wanted to use Python, we could replace that with Python instead, for example. And inside of this code block, there are some options. If you are used to R Markdown, the options used to go inside of those curly braces, but in Quarto, they now use this new hash pipe style. So it's like a special comment, right? Hashtag begins a comment in R, and then we have this vertical pipe. And then we have, again, this is YAML. So it's a little different than how R Markdown used to do things. But we have chunk options here that kind of change how the code appears or whatever. And then we have Markdown. And that's what most of the files in your template are. They're really just the Markdown, and they don't include any of the other stuff. We can include that other stuff optionally. So Markdown is plain text that is marked up by symbols that indicate how things should get formatted. So 2 hashtags, for example, is a level 2 header. This square bracket followed by parentheses with a URL in it is how you make text a link, a hyperlink. And then, here's another code chunk, for example. So Markdown is really great stuff. It is all over the place on the web, and it's very simple. So it's just, there's some rules for how you indicate formatting. So for example, bold text, you put 2 asterisks around it. You can do equations with $signs around them. I showed you links already. You can format things as code with backticks. And if you want a quick reference for how to write Markdown, you can go to RStudio, and under the Help menu, there is a Markdown quick reference option, which opens up in a tab here that gives you, some quick tips, a nice little cheat sheet for how to do Markdown, including stuff like horizontal rules, tables, adding links, adding images, superscript, subscript, strike through, etc. But there's another even better option, I think, is the visual editor that's included in RStudio. So I'll show you that in a second. You can switch to a visual editor, and it makes editing Quarto documents a lot like editing a Word document, where there is a toolbar and common shortcuts like Command B for turning text bold or Command I for italics, like that kind of stuff sort of just works. And you can add sections and tables and lists and images and those callout boxes and citations and cross-references and all that stuff in the visual editor. And you can always switch back and forth between the source and the visual as a way to learn Markdown or fix stuff in a manual way, which is sometimes necessary. So let's just take a look at one of these documents, and we can look at the landing page, because since we have it open already. So we have some Markdown here. Hashtag. This is a level 1 header. We have these callouts. This is a Quarto specific thing. This is not in regular Markdown. These : callout dash note, right? So some of this stuff is Quarto specific. Some of it's just general Markdown. If we want to make something bold, for example, we can put 2 asterisks around it. Kind of shows you that something happened here in this editor. But let's click on the visual editor and see what that looks like. So now we see that things are formatted a little bit closer to what they look like on the actual preview of the website. And we can do things in the toolbar, like, look, we can change the header level from header 1 to header 2, or we could just change it to normal text if we wanted. We can, make things bold or italics with the toolbar or with keyboard shortcuts. We can format things like they were code with this button here. We can add bulleted lists. So ecology, Solution. Other stuff, right? We can add numbered lists here. We can add links. So we can, for example, select some text, click this link button, and type in a URL. Google.com there, right? And now that's formatted as a link. We can use this format button here to look at all the kind of stuff we could do. Block quotes, for example, all kinds of things. And then we've got this great insert menu for inserting kind of anything. So executable cells, I mentioned you could actually have R code in here. I can't think of a reason you might need to run code in a lab handbook to generate a lab handbook, but you're all creative people, and I'm sure there is a cool use of R code in this. Tables, images, just note that for this to work, that image needs to be in the same folder as this R project. So you need to drag an image in, but then you can include that image in your book. Links, shortcodes I'll talk about in a second. Citations, very cool, I think. So insert a citation here. So if you use Zotero as your reference manager, it is just by default connected to RStudio. You don't have to do anything to set this up. And it will allow you to just insert citations there, which look like this. But then if I save this and we look at the preview, which will take a moment to re-render, we'll see a citation down here, right? So it's this in-text citation that if I hover over, gives me like the full citation, and it'll show up in this references page as well. Very, very cool stuff. If you don't have Zotero or use something different, that's okay. You can also paste in DOIs, PubMed IDs, there's various different ways to add citations. And you can do cross-references and all kinds of stuff. Tabs even, like if you wanted a tab set box, like all kinds of fancy things you can do, call outs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll show a call out a little bit later, I think, if I remember. Yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff you can do to edit this. And if you look in the Files tab, basically all of these .qmd are corresponding to chapters in the template book. And you can also add new chapters, which we'll see in a second. Oops, there we go. Oh, yes, shortcodes. I was going to mention these. You don't need to use shortcodes. I'm just mentioning them because there are some in the template, and I just want you to be aware of kind of what they are. So shortcodes do a variety of things. They all look like this: curly brace, open caret, less than sign, whatever you want to call it, some text, and then greater than sign, curly brace. And these are all something that will get replaced with something when it's rendered, and that something could be like an icon or some metadata that's pulled from somewhere else in your book, or it could be a video or whatever. There's lots and lots of different shortcodes that are all, many of them are like extensions to Quarto that allow you to do that. So I'll just show you a couple in this contributing.qmd. I think that's the only one that has shortcodes in it. Just point them out here. So under suggesting a change here, we have one, this meta book.repo URL. That is gonna basically automatically pull the URL to your source code of your book once we set things up, and make that a link. So right now this link doesn't go to the right place, but eventually it will. And then let's see, there's another one here. This FA is font awesome. So that's how we got the little link to the like GitHub, or the icon to the for GitHub in there. I'll show you that. It's under this editing this book. It's this little icon here, but we have it in the editing this book right here. So edit this page. That's how it gets rendered. In here, it's this shortcode FA brands GitHub. So if you want to learn more about those, there's some links here in the slides to learn more about shortcodes and extensions. You don't need to use them. Don't need to worry about them. The next thing we're going to look at is a file included in there called _quarto.yml. This is YAML, just like we saw in that anatomy of a QMD slide. And this is going to be used to configure your book. And that includes the order of the chapters and adding any new chapters. You need to be able to edit this file. So let's take a look at it. I will open that up here. So quarto.yml. So we see at the top, project type book. We need to keep that, obviously. Execute, freeze, auto is only important if your book includes executed code. Probably don't need to touch this. And then under book, this is mostly what we're going to change. So here we have the title of the book. Search is, is there a search bar? Repo URL, we need to change this. Right now, this is pointing towards the template, but we want it to point to your GitHub repository for this source code. And there's some things like, PI name in here. This is a page footer, which you may have noticed, author name. And then we have all our chapters and like the order that they go in here. And these refer to just the file name, the path to the file relative to the sort of the project directory. Bibliography, don't need to worry about that. And then under format, we have a theme set here for the light and the dark mode. These are bootswatch themes, so you can go to bootswatch.com, and if you want to choose different ones, feel free to change these to change the appearance of your book. And that's basically all we need to worry about. Let's go ahead and make some edits, though. I want to edit the title of the book here to my lab group name, and I definitely want to change that repo URL. So let's grab that. It's here. So this should, again, it should be not CCT Data Science, but it should be your username or your organization name. So I'm going to select that, delete it, paste in the correct one. And then I'm going to change this here, Eric Scott. And actually at this moment, I'll show you, there is a way to find and replace everywhere in RStudio. So you can, let's see, it's under Edit, Find in Files. It's Command-Shift-F on a Mac is the keyboard shortcut. And we could find, for example, PI_name in all files, or in just QMD files, for example. And then it brings up this tab down here where we can actually replace all of them if we want all at once. Now one, it's in the README, it's replacing it, which is actually the instructions on how to do exactly what I'm telling you to do. So it probably shouldn't replace it there, but actually you're going to edit your README and change it to be completely different at some point, because these are like the instructions for the template. So I can go ahead and say replace all. Mine as well. The file has changed. Yes, I know. I'll hit save there. So now you'll see everywhere where before it said PI name, it now says Eric Scott. So we could do the same thing with group name. So Command-Shift-F, group_name. We want to change that. So we'll hit find. And replace. It's taking a moment here to find them, I think. Yep, so we can replace that with Scott Lab or whatever your lab name is, and hit replace all. Cool. So great, now that should be fixed everywhere. Let's take a look at the preview first. So here's the preview. It is re-rendering. So I'll come back in a moment when that's done. So that is rendered now, and we'll see that these links now go to the correct place, I think. Oh, that change did not stick because we did the find and replace all. Let me just make sure that URL is correct. Yeah, this reverted at some point. We want the correct URL. Save that. And now all these links to edit this page, report an issue, this link here, GitHub repository, this link over here, this little GitHub icon, these should all go to the correct place after this re-renders. We see that Scott Lab Handbook, it's got a new title there. And if we go back to the welcome page, we'll see the author has probably changed. Yeah. Now, we'll see that in a second. I'm not going to wait for it to re-render right now. You'll see as we did that, a bunch of files popped up here in the Git tab, including ones that are temporary as it is re-rendering. We can watch kind of in the terminal here, stuff's happening. Yeah, here's our home page. It says my name now. All right, so we can practice that commit situation. So group name and PI name updated. I'm going to select all of these, even though they weren't all related to that exact change, right? This is just a demo. I'm going to select all of those, hit commit, close, and hit push to get those on GitHub. You don't have to be pushing after every commit. In fact, you probably shouldn't, but I'm just doing that to kind of demo the cycle. But you can push after you've made a bunch of changes if you want. Okay, so yeah, that is the basics of this Quarto.yml. Oh, one more thing I'll point out is that the default for the table of contents is to take the title that is the level 1 heading in the QMD file. So like, for example, if we look at that contributing.qmd, the title is editing this book. This is the level 1 header. That is what's going to show up in the table of contents over here. If you want something different to show up, that is what's being demonstrated here for the code of conduct. So if I open codeofconduct.qmd, the title is actually Scott Lab Code of Conduct, but I don't want that. That's too long. I don't want it to show up. So I use this style instead. href is the file name or the path to the file, and then text is what the text should be in the table of contents. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. So we can practice adding a new chapter. This is as simple as creating a new blank.qmd file, giving it a title with a level 1 header, adding some text to it, and then adding that chapter to the _quarto.yml. And optionally, we can link to that using this style with, rather than linking to a URL in our finished website, we can just link to the file name. And when it renders, it'll figure that all out and it'll make the links into URLs that work. So to create a new chapter, there are a couple ways to create a new Quarto document. The one I like is to use this, this button here, New Blank File, in the File tab, because it creates a blank Quarto document. And we don't need most of the stuff that's in the one that you'd create through the File menu. So let's create a new Quarto doc and call it lab-equipment. So maybe we want to have a page about all the lab equipment. So I'm going to give it a level 1 header, lab equipment. And we're going to put some stuff in here. I'm going to use the visual editor actually to do that. We're going to add a call out. So command / is a keyboard shortcut for the sort of add anything menu where you can search. And I'm going to search for call out, hit enter. And I'm going to choose a caution call out, hit OK. And then in here, I'm going to say, do not use the autoclave unless you've been trained. See more details in the onboarding section. And we're going to make onboarding into a link. I'm going to select that, click this link button here. And I'm not going to link to a URL. I'm going to link to, well, I am going to link to a URL here, but I'm going to just type onboarding.qmd. That is the name of our onboarding file. So that links to onboarding.qmd. But when I save this, this is not yet part of our book. We need to add it as a chapter in our Quarto.YAML. So I'm going to just add it like in between onboarding and offboarding here. All I have to do is a little hyphen there to add it to this kind of bulleted list, lab-equipment.qmd. And when we save that, our preview will re-render and we'll have a new chapter in here when it's done. So I'll come back when this loads. Okay, it's finished rendering. Only took a few seconds here. But now we have this new lab equipment section, and we'll see we have this caution callout box and this link. It's probably very hard to see in the video, but it links to onboarding.html. So Quarto has figured out what the actual URL link should be. If I click on that, it'll take us to the onboarding chapter. And this is in the preview mode. Clicking on links is a little bit slow to load just because it's like rendering the pages as needed, but it will be much faster when it is a live website. So yeah, that brings us to the rendering one, and here's a link that goes to the contributing.qmd, right, for example. Okay, so that's adding a new chapter. So here is a slide with the complete list of edits. I think I may have missed some things. In the README, this really needs to be, right now it has instructions on how to use the template. You need to edit it to be about your group and what this is, right? So source code for our group handbook, blah, blah, blah. Here's the link to the URL. Once we have it as a website, you'll put that in there. Other stuff. In Quarto YAML, we edited the title, the repo URL. We edited the author name. I didn't put in my ORCID ID. That is optional, by the way. And you can add other authors too. I recommend you add anybody who contributes to the book as an author or have them do that themselves. Date, I think, actually says today, and you don't have to change that if you don't want to, but you might. You might want to add chapters, reorder them, rename them, whatever. In the code of conduct, there is a PI_email that I don't think we replaced. It should be your email address, like a contact, who to contact if there's violations in the code of conduct. And then in all the Quarto files, like replace group name, PI name, wherever those are, and add content to them. And anywhere where there's these call out boxes that say like edit this section. Again, those are just my ideas. You'll want to eventually delete those once you've kind of filled out those sections. So now we're going to publish it. That is an important piece of it. So to do that, first we're going to stop the Quarto Preview process, which remember is like tying up your terminal. We're going to stop that, and we're going to run Quarto render, which I actually think is maybe optional, because I think when you run the next command, Quarto publish GHS pages, it does the Quarto render anyways. We'll go ahead and do Quarto render. So Quarto render is like the preview, but rather than kind of opening it up in a live browser, like a live preview, it's just creating all those HTML files that will be part of your website. And I'll show you where those get created. And then Quarto publish GH pages. GH pages is for GitHub pages. There are other places you can publish Quarto documents very easily. In fact, if you just do Quarto publish, you'll see like a list of options. But today we're going to use GitHub Pages, which is going to allow that GitHub to like automatically re-render when you make changes to the code. So this ideally is just a one-time thing actually. So let's try it out. So we're going to hit the red stop button here on the terminal to stop this preview process, and you should get your prompt back. And then you can run Quarto space render. Oops, render. And we have made some changes. So after this renders, I'll kind of talk about what it does, and then we'll commit and push those changes. Okay, now it's finished rendering. And so what it did is it created this _book folder, which is not something you should edit by hand. _book, _extensions, .github. I mean, really the only thing you should not edit by hand is anything in the _book and _extensions. The things that you probably will need to edit are the .qmd files, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, in underscore book, we'll see these are HTML. And so this is like all the HTML for your website it's created. Now you'll notice it doesn't show up in the Git pane, and that's because the setup that we have, GitHub.com is actually going to do this Quarto render and like publish for you in the future. We're just going to do it once this first time to get things working. So I'm going to do Quarto space publish space gh-pages and hit enter. And this will ask me a question. It'll ask me if I want to publish it to my username.github.io/ScottLabHandbook or whatever you called yours. So that is going to be your URL for your book. And we're going to say yes. And you might get one of these file deleted things. You can just say yes on these. That is just because it switched to a new branch where the file didn't exist yet. There's some Git and GitHub stuff like happening in the background. And we'll wait for this to finish. It's going to render again, as you see. So again, I think maybe the Quarto render step was not necessary, rendering for publish. And then it'll publish it. And when it's done, if everything goes well, it'll open up in your web browser. Aha, I have gotten an error. And I've gotten this before, and I left this in because I think maybe you might get this error too. It says RPC failed HTTP 400 curl 22 send pack, unexpected disconnect while reading sideband packet, fatal, the remote end hung up unexpectedly. I did not know what this is, and I still don't quite know what it means. And so please don't follow this advice blindly. You get this error, do your own research, please. I Googled this, and the solution I got was to run this command. This command, git config http.postbuffer, and then some number, which is apparently equivalent to 500 megabytes in, I assume, bytes. I'm actually going to make this a global option by saying git config -- global and then all that stuff, because I don't want to have to set it again for every project. Again, I don't exactly know what this does. It increases the size of the HTTP post buffer, which yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that does, but it seemed to work for me before. So I'm gonna run that. I'm gonna hit the up arrow here to get back to this Quarto publish gh-pages and run that one more time. And it's going to ask me again. Yes. All right. This time, hopefully, it will work. Okay, it has worked. And it opened up. And so this looks, like your preview, except you'll notice the URL is eric.github.io/ScottLabHandbook, or whatever your username is, .github.io/ what you called it. So this is on the web now. You can send this link to people. They can see this. So if it was successful, you'll see here, note GitHub pages, sites use caching. You might need to click the refresh button to see the changes, and it'll give you the link to where it was published. Now, we've done that once. And it's actually going to be the only time, hopefully, that we have to do this. You can publish again. If you make changes, you can publish again using that Quarto publish gh-pages. But we actually probably don't want to, because we want the code that's on GitHub to be the one source of truth for what's on your book. And so in my case, actually, I did that publish step before I remembered to commit and push these. So the version of this lab equipment page is on the website, but it's not on GitHub, weirdly. So what we want to do is actually rely on a GitHub action. So this is another thing that comes with your template. You have what's called a GitHub action, which is also defined using YAML, interestingly. GitHub actions are a whole thing you can learn about on your own if you'd like, but they allow automated stuff to happen upon code changes on GitHub, or other things, like you can have a timed event that happens every Monday or something. And so this particular action, whenever code changes on the main branch on GitHub, it does this publishing, it does this Quarto publish for you. So that way, that GitHub main branch is the one source of truth. So we'll see what happens when we do that. This, by the way, if you've been following along, you may have gotten some emails about a GitHub action failing, and that is normal. When we first set this up, every time you push changes to GitHub, it was trying to run this action, but because we hadn't done that publish the first time, it was failing. But now that we've published it, you shouldn't get those failed emails anymore unless something goes wrong. So let's make another change. Let's get rid of this demo stuff, this like bulleted list stuff. Clean that up, and we'll see how it changes. So we need to go back to index.qmd, and let's just delete all this junk that we put in there for demo stuff. Save it. Now we've got a couple things going on here, and I'm gonna try to do a good job and have separate commit messages for these. So this change and this change, checking both of those, takes a moment for the checkboxes to show up sometimes. Both had to do with add lab equipment chapter. So that's one commit. And then a separate commit here is, check that box, clean up landing page junk. And there we go. Takes a moment sometimes. Commit. Close. Okay, so now we've made those two commits. And now I'm going to hit push, and we're going to go over to GitHub and see what happens. All right. I'm going to trust that this works. Yep, there we go. Now if we look at our GitHub page here and refresh it, we will see there is a little orange dot here, clean up landing page junk. That was our latest commit. This little orange dot, if I hover over it, it says pending. Oops, it's hard to get it to the tooltip to show up. Trust me, it says pending. But we can also go to the Actions tab and see stuff is happening. So we see next to this commit, there was an orange circle. It just turned into a green check. That was for Quarto publish. And then I think there's another step. Let's hit reload. Yeah, there's another step after that. Pages, build, and deployment that is going to run. And once those two steps are done, if you want to watch them go, you can click on these and see all the details. But once those are done, our website should update. So they're done now. So if I go back to our website and I hit reload, there we go. We see we've cleaned that stuff up. So I don't actually need to use that Quarto publish gh command anymore. All I have to do is edit my files, commit and push the changes to GitHub, and it'll update the book. And that is because of the GitHub Actions. Let me show you where it is, just something you don't need to edit, but under this .github file, folder, sorry, there's a workflows folder, and there's this publish.yml. This is what defines that workflow. So you don't need to touch this unless something goes wrong and you do or you want to. And you can always ask us for help for configuring this kind of thing if there's something else you want it to do. Okay. One more thing, actually, before we get to the kind of wrap up, I do want to kind of show you a little bit about what these buttons do now. So if I click this edit this page button, if I have permission to edit this repository, which I do because I'm the owner of it, it takes me here and I can just edit this right in GitHub. So, you know, we don't get the nice like preview, live preview, but also this is great for lab members who really don't want to have, you know, the whole book like synced on their computer and using, you know, RStudio to push and pull changes and all that. They can just edit it directly on GitHub. And if you're just editing text, that's pretty easy. In this case, there's all these call outs, like they might get it screwed up. But if they're just editing plain text, that's not bad. So I can say, you know, we don't want this to be bold actually. So, and then I can click the commit changes button and we can give it a description that's better, like don't bold lab name. And we can just hit commit changes. Now, if there's somebody that doesn't have ownership over this repository, basically the same thing happens, but they will be asked to, it will automatically fork the repository, which is basically like creating a copy of it on their own GitHub username space and make a pull request. But all that kind of will be taken care of by GitHub. And I have descriptions about how that works in the template. And then, oh, I know why we can't go back because, yeah. And they report an issue button. I'm going to open this in a new tab this time. Brings up an issue, which is supposed to have a template here. Interesting. I may have forgotten to do that. If you click new issue, we have a suggest and edit template. Yes, I have to fix that in the the template. So, but it just is a very, very simple template that, you know, reminds people if you want to suggest something, like say where that suggestion should go. Okay, so that's your book. Again, like you have it all set up. So all you need to do is edit those .qmd files and that Quarto YML file, commit, push your changes to GitHub, and it should change. If you want to learn more about Quarto, quarto.org is a great place to go. There's a great like getting started with Quarto tutorial. There's also a section specifically about Quarto books, which is what our handbook is made with. If you're at University of Arizona, you can join the UA Data Science Slack, where there's a link here in these slides, excuse me. And there's a Quarto channel in that Slack. That's a great place to ask questions about Quarto. I believe there's a Git or GitHub channel as well, or you can just ask in the general channel. Our group also has drop-in hours on Tuesdays virtually that you're welcome to join. And then for Git and GitHub issues, I really do recommend this Happy Git with R website, happygitwithr.com. Lots of great information about, you know, setups, common errors, and bits of confusion and things like that. So thank you all. Oh, here's these references I showed earlier. So the paper about GitHub being useful for non-programmers in ecology and evolution, but also just generally, I think, in research in academia. And this really nice paper about why every lab needs a handbook that this was kind of based on. So, thank you all. Sorry. Didn't quite have my camera set up right there. Thank you all for coming and watching this. And please do let me know if you have any feedback either on this presentation or on the template itself. You can leave a comment on the video. You can contact me, or you can open an issue on the template GitHub repository. Yeah, please let me know what you think, or if there's improvements or mistakes I've made. All right, thanks for watching.